The wind crawled across the dust-blown yard of Bitter Creek like a dying breath, scraping grit against timber and skin as if the land itself was mourning what was about to happen. And at the very center of that forgotten frontier town stood a makeshift auction platform, rough-cut planks, sun-bleached, splintering, and stained by the desperate history of men who sold whatever they could to survive, including, on this cursed afternoon, a young woman whose shaking arms wrapped protectively around her sleeping newborn as though she could shield the child from the cruelty of the world simply by holding it close. Her name was Ilara Whitlock, though no one in the crowd cared to speak it. To them she was just another stray, a burden, something to be priced and purchased, and the baby in her arms, barely days old, did nothing but increase her value. She sat tied to a thick post in the middle of the stage, her wrists bound with scratchy rope, her pale hair hanging messily over her face, her blue dress torn from travel and hardship, and her eyes red, tired, but burning with a mother's stubborn courage, flicked from the leering men below to the horizon again and again, as if she hoped, prayed, begged for someone to appear. But no one ever came for people like her, not in Bitter Creek, not against the likes of Sheriff Creighton Holt, the man who strutted in front of her now with the arrogance of someone who believed the entire desert obeyed his will, his revolver gleaming in his hand as he tapped it lightly against his thigh, grinning like a wolf that had finally cornered its meal. Around them the townsfolk gathered in a loose ring, some ashamed, some indifferent, others eager, as if cruelty had become a spectacle in their dull lives. And behind them the wooden buildings leaned like tired ghosts, creaking softly in the dry air. Holt raised his voice, deep, cold, commanding, and shouted to the crowd, "Step forward, gentlemen. One girl, able-bodied, obedient once broken in, comes with her own newborn, free." Laughter rippled through the men, thick and ugly. Ilara's jaw tightened, her arms squeezing around the baby as though she feared he might try to take even the breath from the child's lungs. The baby stirred, giving a soft, confused whimper that tore something inside her, because she knew the world he'd been born into was already trying to swallow him whole. Holt crouched in front of her, lifting her chin with the barrel of his gun, his breath smelling of whiskey and arrogance. "You can make this easier, girl. Smile, look grateful. Buyers like that." She stared back in silence, her hatred so sharp she could have carved her freedom out of it if hatred were a knife. Holt smirked and stood tall again. "All right, then. Let's start the bidding." But before he could speak again, a low rumble passed over the gathered crowd. Not thunder, not wagons, but something heavier, something deliberate. Heads turned. A stillness swept the yard. Even the hangman's rope behind the platform seemed to stop swaying. Through the shimmering heat rising from the desert road, a lone figure appeared, broad-shouldered, tall, walking with the kind of slow, unhurried purpose that made even hardened gunslingers shift uneasily. He wore a weather-roughened coat of animal hide draped over his shoulders, dust clinging to his boots and beard, and across his back rested a long rifle carved from dark mountain walnut, its barrel catching the late afternoon sun like a blade. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Mountain man. Where'd he come from? Looks dangerous." Sheriff Holt lifted his chin, scoffing, though the flicker of irritation in his eyes betrayed something else. Recognition, maybe even fear. The stranger walked closer, each step heavy but patient, as if measuring every soul in the yard. His eyes were steel gray, cold as high-altitude snowmelt and twice as unforgiving, and when they swept across the scene, the tied woman, the newborn, the salivating crowd, something ancient and volcanic stirred inside him. No one knew his name yet, but they would. They would speak it for years with equal parts awe and dread. His presence alone felt like a storm rolling down from the mountaintops. Ilara lifted her head, her breath catching. She had never seen him before, not in her travels, not in her life, but the moment her gaze met his, something instinctive inside her whispered, "This man is not like the others." Sheriff Holt's voice rose, brittle with tension. "You lost, stranger? This is county business." But the mountain man didn't answer. Instead, he stepped onto the platform with the kind of certainty that made the men below instinctively place hands on their holsters. He stopped an arm's length from Ilara, his shadow falling over her like a shield, and his voice, rough, deep, rumbling like a landslide, finally broke the silence. "Untie her!" 4 simple words, calm, controlled, deadly. Holt barked a laugh, glancing at the crowd as if expecting them to join in, but the laughter never came. The air had grown too tight, too sharp. "Maybe you didn't hear me," Holt said, tapping his gun. "She's property being auctioned. Unless you plan on bidding, you'd best—" The mountain man stepped closer, and Holt froze mid-sentence. No one saw him reach for his rifle. No one heard a gun cock. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. But the message radiating off the stranger was unmistakable. "Try me." Holt swallowed hard. Behind him, his deputies exchanged uneasy glances. The mountain man finally spoke again, his tone quiet but carrying across the entire square. "That woman is leaving with me. The child, too, if anyone here thinks otherwise." His hand shifted a fraction toward the long rifle strapped across his back. "Speak." A hush fell so absolute that even the restless baby quieted, as though sensing the world around him had begun to tremble. Holt forced a smile, though it cracked at the edges. "You're outnumbered, mountain man." The stranger didn't blink. "Not enough."